Let the torch of freedom burn.
Let the torch of freedom burn. I love the theme music for WallBuilders Live. If you want the torch of freedom to burn, then it's time to do your part, and it starts with education right here on WallBuilders Live. We are looking at the hot topics of the day from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective so that we can learn truth, seek truth, learn that truth, and then fight for that truth, stand for that truth. We've got to speak that truth, right? We've got to start sharing that truth with as many people as possible, and we're so glad you're here to listen today and be a part of the seeking of that truth, but then also to act on that truth. We appreciate you being a part of the program. Hope that you'll visit our website today at wallbuilderslive.com. That's where you can learn about us, the host here on the program. I'm Rick Green. I'm a former Texas legislator and America's Constitution coach, and I'm here with David Barton. He's America's premier historian and our founder at WallBuilders, and Tim Barton, national speaker and pastor and president of WallBuilders. Again, at wallbuilderslive.com. That's wallbuilderslive.com. That's where you can find out more about us and the program, get a list of the stations around the country where we can be heard, and also the place where you can make a donation. It's very important as a listener-supported program that our supporters out there are willing to come alongside us, lock shields with us, support us financially, support us by sharing the program with friends and family. You can do all of that at the website today at wallbuilderslive.com. All right, fellas, it was so shocking yesterday to have good news from George Barna. No offense to George, but, he just reports what's going on in the culture, and frankly, the polling in the culture has not been good recently. But yesterday was great. We had so much good news. We're going to have him back later today because he also found some very common issues that would unite the country. And David, I've heard you say over the years, you get 80% of the country to agree on something. That's highly unusual because 20% are going to be just against whatever it is. And he found 6 issues where people are in that 75 to 80% range. And so we're going to find out from him, what are these things that could actually unite the country?
Yeah, and this is an amazing thing because given the polarization that occurs right now in America, given how far each side appears to be from the other, given how far Republicans and Democrats seem to be from each other, and there appears to be no middle ground, for him to find 6 issues where that essentially 70 to 80% of Americans are agreeing on what they want, that's amazing. I'm really looking forward to seeing what those 6 are because I can't imagine what they would be. I just, off the top of my head, I don't know. We've joked about this before, but this goes back to an axiom that is attributed to Robert Kennedy where he said that 20% of the people oppose everything all the time. 20% of the people don't agree the sun comes up in the east and goes down in the west. So I don't know what we're going to get 80% of Americans to agree on that they want politically.
Yeah, and to give George Barna a little cover, too, the reason that we joke with him sometimes that it seems like when we have him on, it's always negative or pessimistic, is because he's reporting conditions that reflect human nature. As he does polling, it's like, no, here's what people say they believe. Here's what people say they value. Here's where their morals are. And it does not always reflect the biblical morality that we would hope is more infiltrated into culture and society in America that is wider spread, and it's not always there. And so, yeah, guys, as you pointed out, having 6 things where there's going to be some positive trend shifts or where the majority of people agree on, if we were just speculating, right, what could you get 80% of people to agree on? Well, I would like a bigger paycheck. Yes, I think 80% of people would agree I would like a bigger paycheck. Yes, if it came to monetary possessions, sure, you probably can get people to agree on that. But if it comes to philosophy or morals or values or direction of the nation, it's interesting to try to consider what would it be the things that the majority of Americans would agree on. And based on the fractured climate that we live in politically, where people have absolutely tended to choose their sides, that they've discarded oftentimes base principles in favor of their side winning, it's very much in contrast to what George Washington said in his farewell address, where he talked about don't let the love of party cause you to lose the principles that you need to be supporting. It seems that we have become more of that situation in America. And so for George to indicate that there's some areas where Americans have found a lot of common ground and agreement, I am very excited and very curious what those are going to be.
All right, well, George Barna back with us today. If you missed yesterday, by the way, it's on our website right now at wallbuilderslive.com. You can grab that program anytime. Stay with us. We'll be right back on WallBuilders Live.
This is Tim Barton from WallBuilders with another moment from American history. After the final victory at Yorktown, the Continental Army awaited the outcome of peace negotiations with Great Britain. Pastor Israel Evans, a chaplain in the Army, proposed to George Washington that they build a structure where church services could be held during the months of waiting. Washington approved the plan and urged his officers to ensure that the soldiers attended service. Pastor Evans further knew, if we were to secure the liberties they had fought for, sound education would be crucial. He declared, every parent and every friend to the freedom of his country ought to be attentive to the improvement of our youth in the principles of freedom and good government. And then the people will stand fast in their liberty for a long time. Our schools today need to return to teaching the principles of freedom and good government in order for America to survive and prosper. For more information about Pastor Israel Evans and other colonial patriots, go to wallbuilders.com.
We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us. Yesterday, George Barna was with us and had so much good news about the survey on socialism and that finally moving in the right direction in terms of public opinion in America that we said we got to do a second day with him. So, George, thanks for coming back and doing the show again and got more good news for us today.
Well, you're a glutton for punishment, but I'm happy to give it. So, yeah.
Well, yesterday we talked about the trends in the view of socialism in America, and for the first time in a long time, those numbers went down in a big way. You also found in this survey that there were actually some key issues that would actually unite us, not just be rhetoric from the president while he attempts to impeach the former president and shun half the country. Instead of just using rhetoric for unity, you actually found issues that would unify and create a supermajority. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, I mean, the whole idea here is, you've got the Biden administration with Mrs. Pelosi and Mr. Schumer and others running around saying, oh, we have a mandate. Well, I mean, let's be honest here. There's no such thing as a mandate when you win an election by 3 points, if you won it by that. And you lost 25 seats in the lower chamber of Congress, and you've only got a 50-50 split in the upper chamber of Congress when you had 34 seats up for grabs. So, I mean, certainly there's no mandate. But if we look at what the American people are dying for, what is it that they're saying, this is what we're electing the government to do? We don't know about the wacky agendas that everybody's putting forth from both parties, but here's what we are putting you into place to do on our behalf. Because it is a republic, you're supposed to represent us. Here's what we're asking for. And we found that if you take this political notion of a supermajority, which depending on who's defining it, it's usually thought of as maybe a 60 or 67% majority or more asking for something. We found that there are a half dozen prescriptions for policies that the American people, regardless of whether they voted for Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden, are coming together and saying, yeah, we really want that. And so if all this language about, oh, we're going to bring unity to the country is meaningful, if it's not just a marketing ruse, well, I believe that this is the direction for initiating that kind of unity, because these are the kinds of policies that Americans want to rally behind. This is what they've put these people into office to do, regardless of what party people come from, regardless of who is being voted for. This is what America wants to see in the future.
Man, George, I would not have even thought in this environment that you could find a single issue that 80% or more would agree on. That we were, I thought, man, we are just truly split all the way down on every issue. So this is really good news. So what are some of those issues that have that type of agreement?
Well, some of them, and this is one where we had 83% of Americans, 87% who voted for Trump, 84% who voted for Biden, say they want the government to aggressively increase the number of manufacturing jobs in the United States. That's going to have, of course, far-reaching effects on our foreign policy, our economic policy, our taxation policy, all kinds of things. But people are saying, yeah, that's fine. Let's go forward. We really need that to happen. Another example, investing heavily in restoring the nation's infrastructure. 81% of all Americans are behind that, including 83% of Trump supporters, 84% of Biden supporters. These are kind of no-brainers. It's like, okay, let's get busy. Another example, making Social Security and Medicare financially solvent. Again, 8 out of 10 Americans, including 78% of Trump voters, 86% of Biden voters, saying, yeah, why would we allow those programs to go bankrupt? I mean, there's a long and sordid history behind how we got to that point. But people are saying, all right, let's get over it and let's fix it. And now's the time to do it. And, you've got more than 3 out of 4 people, regardless of who they voted for, saying they want to reduce the federal government's debt. So you've got all these calls for, let's give away more money. Let's keep printing as far as the presses can go. And Americans say, wait a minute, somebody's ultimately got to pay for that, but somebody's going to be us. We prefer to see some fiscal restraint here. Let's rethink what it is that we're doing.
And that one, George, that one would be one where you could reconcile that with the previous ones, because I can't remember who said it, but basically the phrase was, let's keep the promises we made and stop making promises we can't keep. So they're basically saying, hey, make these past promises solvent with Social Security and Medicare, but don't keep adding up debt by making new promises and creating new programs. Reduce the federal debt.
Well, it's interesting, too, because when you look at the things that everybody's saying, we really want this, they're not sitting there saying, I want more handouts. They're actually saying, I want a job. I want to be able to earn money. I want to feel good about myself. I want to be productive. I want to add value to the nation and to my community. And they're saying, and by the way, I have to live with fiscal restraint. I expect my government to do the same thing.
Yeah.
Just because somebody got votes in an election doesn't give them license to take my wallet and do what they want with it. They need to structure the government the same way that I need to structure my household.
If I could back up a minute on the manufacturing job question, was there much of a deep dive there in terms of what that means? In other words, what jobs that would actually include? I don't know what that word means to people nowadays.
Yeah, and the truth of the matter is, on all of these things, it was not a deep dive. We were asking them what they want the new incoming administration to prioritize.
Gotcha.
What are the things they want them to focus on and to really get busy working on? So in my industry, there are different kinds of questions you can write in a survey. There's a kind of question that's called a costless question. These, unfortunately, would be considered costless questions, because we didn't say, would you like to increase manufacturing jobs if it meant that we don't have trade with Japan or China or, whatever. I mean, giving the other side of the coin. That was not part of this. That's the next level down that needs to be done to figure out, okay, how do we make this happen so that we're doing what the people say we need to do, but we're doing it in a way that's most intelligent and efficient.
Yeah, and the reason I went there is because of what you were describing. That people are saying, I'm not wanting a handout. I want to be able to go work. And, of course, I immediately started thinking about the tens of thousands of jobs lost with the shutting down the Keystone Pipeline. And I know that's technically not a manufacturing job, but it is. There's a lot of jobs there, and it's similar to manufacturing jobs. You are manufacturing a pipeline. You're putting that in across the whole country. So anyway, I just started thinking, I would think that those people that want the debt reduced and they want to be able to work and they want to, restore the nation's infrastructure and that sort of thing, they were probably not supportive of the trade-off that you just described, but we wouldn't know that without diving into it. The trade-off of, well, if I want the Green New Deal, then I've got to give up all these jobs with the pipeline and low cost of fuel and all these other trade-offs. So that would be really interesting. But I can't let you go without the last two, because these are two of my favorites as well. Reducing federal income taxes. That was almost 3/4 of the country, 73%.
Yeah, and there again, you had more than 7 out of 10 people who voted for Joe Biden and about 8 out of 10 who voted for Donald Trump, saying that they wanted to see that done. So, you look at the dominant media narrative, you would be led to believe there's never anything we're going to agree on. We're just going to have to push forward and make something happen. Turns out that's not the case. If you do the work to figure out what are people really thinking, you find out, what, we're probably more united as a country than the media narrative wants us to believe, and then many politicians want us to believe, because then they don't have as much power. The power is supposed to be invested in the people.
Yeah.
And so when we look at these kinds of things, we realize, what, we really do have that power. We even have the power of unity behind us. We're just not wielding it very effectively because we've been lied to about the fact that we're not united. We are still the United States. There are still ways to move forward.
So good. All right, we'll close out with my favorite one. This is a passion one for me. Increased school choice. I was so glad to see this number so huge. 73% of Americans want to increase school choice and give parents more choices. that might surprise a lot of people out there right now, thinking that only Trump supporters would have supported that and not Biden supporters, but you found it to be almost equal.
Yeah, and, this was, frankly, the one that surprised me the most. Of all I think we had about 24 policy prescriptions that we were evaluating. And to find that 3/4 of America says, yeah, they want to increase school choice for parents. Well, we started digging back and trying to figure out, why would they do this? Where did this come from? And I believe it's largely related to what's happened during the last year or so because of the pandemic, with almost all parents having to get much more heavily involved in the education of their own children. And as they've done that, they've learned a lot of things about the education system that they didn't know. They've experienced it firsthand. And so we now know from other research that's being done that, for instance, homeschooling is growing by leaps and bounds across the country, not because parents fancy themselves as teachers, but because when they saw what was taking place with their children in public schools, they thought it's probably time for us to step up and take on more of this. So I think a lot of this is in response to the pandemic and what it's done to people's understanding of how education works in America.
Boy, you talk about a major silver lining there, George, because in my opinion, school choice is one of the key factors to actually saving the country. And my goodness, this is such good news that if out of this pandemic chaos, that one issue could move to these numbers, I don't know that I would say it was worth it, but maybe long term, to see 72% of Biden backers saying that they want more school choice. I mean, that's huge. So I hope all of our legislator friends out there that are listening are hearing this, and because we've got states where those numbers have been good in the past and we haven't been able to get school choice through, including my own state of Texas, and it's so frustrating. So I'm so glad to see these numbers move the right direction, and I think you're exactly right. I think the pandemic has a lot to do with this, and I hope that our legislators will capitalize on that and give these parents these choices. So much good news, George. Thank you so much for the work that you guys do. Best place for folks to follow you and the research and the releases as you send them out.
culturalresearchcenter.com is where we put all of these studies. They're all free. You can download them, send them. If you want to sign up, we'll alert you when the new ones come out. And I'm hoping that people will take these and use them in their communities, in their churches, and with their government leaders, so that we really do get the kind of governance that we want and deserve.
Good stuff. culturalresearchcenter.com. George Barna, thanks so much, man. Appreciate your time today.
Good to be with you, Rick.
Stay with us, folks. We'll be right back with David and Tim Barton. Hey, friends, if you've been listening to WallBuilders Live for very long at all, you know how much we respect our veterans and how appreciative we are of the sacrifice they make to make our freedoms possible. One of the ways that we love to honor those veterans is to tell their stories here on WallBuilders Live. Once in a while, we get an opportunity to interview veterans that have served on those front lines, that have made incredible sacrifices, have amazing stories that we want to share with the American people. One of the very special things we get to do is interview World War II veterans. You've heard those interviews here on WallBuilders Live, from folks that were in the Band of Brothers to folks like Edgar Harrell that survived the Indianapolis, to so many other great stories you've heard on WallBuilders Live. You have friends and family that also serve. If you have World War II veterans in your family that you would like to have their story shared here on WallBuilders Live, please email us at radio@wallbuilders.com. radio@wallbuilders.com. Give us a brief summary of the story, and we'll set up an interview. Thanks so much for sharing here on WallBuilders Live. We're back here on WallBuilders Live. Thanks for staying with us, and thanks again to George Barna for our 2 programs this week. And we've got links today at our website for both of these, both of the results on these studies. The one we talked about yesterday with regard to socialism and the positive trend right now where fewer and fewer people are supporting socialism, which is a very good thing. And then today, just all of these issues, all 6 of these issues that the American people, 75 to 80% roughly, agree on, and some of them more than 80%. So, David, Tim, any of these issues really surprise you guys?
Well, I want to hit them again real quick because they were amazing. 83% wants the government aggressively to increase manufacturing jobs in the U.S. 81% want America's infrastructure restored. 80% want Medicaid and Social Security financially solvent. 76% want to reduce the national debt. That one just floors me. 76% want to reduce the national debt. 73% want to reduce federal income taxes. That also floors me. 73% want increased school choice. That one also floors me. I mean, Rick, you said up front you didn't think there'd be this many issues people agree on, but here I think is where the difference is. All of this stuff is really great objectives, but if I tell you, hey, let's drive from Washington, D.C. to L.A., let's make a cross-country trip, the disagreement is going to enter when we start talking about which route we're going to take. Do we want to take I-30 or I-40? Which way are we going? We're going to take the southern route that goes down I-20 to I-10. No, let's take the northern route that goes I-70. And so we'll get disagreements on that. And so, here's the things I was thinking. And as George said, he asked these questions in what pollsters call a costless question. I'm just asking you for the end result. I'm not asking you how you get there. I didn't ask you what the cost is. So I can see people wanting to reduce the debt. Now, here's the question. One side says, let's reduce the debt by cutting police and cutting the military. And the other side says, let's reduce the debt by cutting social programs and welfare. That's where you're going to have trouble getting 76% to agree, let's reduce the debt. I love the fact that people want to get out of debt and want the government out of debt and want less spending. The question is, what cost are you willing to pay to get there? And I think that's where the polarization comes in again. Is on which road we're going to take to get to these objectives. There's just so many that I saw on infrastructure. How do you rebuild your infrastructure without increasing debt? How do you pay for more roads and bridges? And how do you get that done? And at the same time, you want to reduce the national debt. And I'm not sure what the answer to that is, but I think it's great to be able to have some common goals. And just if we could get leaders in Congress and elsewhere talking about, hey, these are the common goals people want to get to, it becomes a lot easier to pressure Congress to make some concessions to get to those goals when you know that you've got 3/4 or 4/5 of the people pushing for those objectives.
And also recognizing that a lot of Americans really are rational people and understand there's a give and take in this process. And so if you have your ideal list, well, here's what I think we ought to cut, and somebody else, well, here's what I think we ought to cut. Most American people are willing to navigate and negotiate because that's how we budget our lives every day. There's certain things we want. Well, I can't afford to do that right now, so I'm going to do this over here. This is just part of being an adult and making big boy and big girl decisions, right? We put on our big boy pants, our big girl pants, and we just get the job done. That's very interesting to see that trend is there. It will be now interesting to see if Congress feels pressure in any of these areas to do these things, because even though that's what polling might indicate, we know that a lot of Americans aren't very outspoken or willing to be outspoken about a lot of their positions because they're afraid of repercussions that might come and they don't want to get canceled and the pushback that might come. But this is where it's kind of a fascinating thought to think that the majority of Americans might be on the same page in many of these issues. Now, Dad, as you mentioned, we might have different ideas of how we accomplish that end goal. But the fact that we're all trying to achieve the same thing, this is what can really help restore some of the fractures in the nation, is recognizing that we do still have some very similar and common objectives.
Well, I think it's going to be a kind of a test, if you will, for Congress on one issue out of the six particularly. We talked yesterday about how the support for socialism has plummeted since Biden's been in office. And they've seen things that I didn't know what socialism looked like. That wasn't what I was thinking it was. That didn't meet my expectations. The one thing on this list that I think will be the first thing that really kind of becomes visible, it's not going to be stuff like school choice, because the government hadn't been doing basically anything on school choice to speak of. There's always a difference with the president, because when the president comes in, he says, well, I want school choice back in Washington, D.C., or I don't want it. And that always changes from Republicans to Democrats. Republicans say, let's do school choice in D.C. Well, that's 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 students. So we never see it go nationally, so people don't notice that. But the fact that you have 73% that want to reduce the federal income tax, I'm going to be real interested to see if Congress can get through this session without raising income taxes, because that will be something that everybody does notice. And if they raise income taxes, it's going to be kind of like the wake-up call they're seeing with socialism. Hey, that wasn't what I was expecting. And so the fact that you had such high percentage of both Democrats and Republicans opposed to income taxes, I think that may be a real trigger point in this legislative session to, again, wake people up to, this is not what I was expecting.
Well, it's such good news that there are unifying issues, and that some of those issues, I mean, we've been talking about on the program for years, like school choice and lowering the federal debt. I mean, these are big-time issues, and to have that kind of a number, I mean, 73%, 75%, 80% on some of these is just phenomenal. I mean, that's really good news for folks. It tells you that our gut is right on these issues, right? That the things that we would like to see happen when we look at them from a biblical, historical, and constitutional perspective, we know what the right position is, and now we're finding that more of the country agrees with us on those things than maybe we thought when you look at some of the things coming out of Washington, D.C. So very good news today from George Barna. We're so glad you were a part of the program today. We want to ask you to do a couple things. Number one, ask you to share the program. And get the links from our website at wallbuilderslive.com. Share it with your friends and family and others. Help to get them educated and equipped and inspired as well. And then also we want to ask you to go to our website, wallbuilderslive.com today, and make a contribution. We're a listener-supported program, so thank you for being a part of that. When you make that one-time or monthly contribution, it amplifies our voice. It allows us to get more truth out there to more people. And then, actually, I'm going to throw a third thing out there. We also want to encourage you to start hosting a biblical citizenship class in your home or at your church. We give the material to you for free. It is a great way to encourage others to be good citizens, to be biblical citizens. That is what will save our nation. Salt and light is so needed in the culture today. Learn more about it today at biblicalcitizens.com. That's biblicalcitizens.com. We sure appreciate you listening to our program today. You've been listening to WallBuilders Live.
We stand undivided forever.